Something happened last night that may change the way you look at everything you thought you understood. Maybe the person you have been thinking about suddenly felt distant. Maybe a conversation ended differently than expected. Maybe you woke up with an unusual feeling that something was about to be revealed. Or perhaps nothing obvious happened at all, yet somewhere inside you, you sensed that a chapter was moving toward a turning point. Take this message as a fictional, spiritual-style reflection rather than a prediction of what another person is secretly doing. You do not have to believe that every sentence is literally destined to happen. Instead, let the words invite you to think about honesty, boundaries, unexpected changes, and the kind of truth that can completely change a relationship. The title may have caught your attention because it sounds impossible. Your soulmate may be leaving next week, and then comes the bigger revelation. They may be preparing to confess that they are married. But even that may not be the biggest secret. The biggest secret could be why they waited so long to tell you. That is where the story truly begins. Imagine receiving a message from someone you never expected to hear from. Their words are short. Their tone is unusually serious. They do not joke. They do not make excuses. They simply say, "I need to tell you something before I leave." You read those words again, "before I leave." Your mind immediately begins searching for an explanation. Leave where? Why next week? Why didn't they tell you sooner? What happened? And why does it suddenly feel as though every unanswered question from the past is standing in front of you at the same time? Sometimes the most powerful turning points do not arrive with dramatic announcements. They begin with one honest sentence: "I should have told you the truth." That sentence can change everything, because once the truth begins, it becomes difficult to return to pretending. Maybe this person has spent a long time trying to keep different parts of their life separate. Perhaps they have been afraid that revealing one truth would force them to explain another. Perhaps they kept postponing an uncomfortable conversation because they believed they could somehow find the perfect moment. But there is rarely a perfect moment for difficult honesty. There is only the moment when someone finally decides that hiding is more painful than speaking, and perhaps that moment is approaching, not because the universe guarantees that a specific person will return to you. Not because a mystical force has written every detail of your future, but because people eventually reach moments when they can no longer avoid the consequences of their choices. That is the real mystery behind this message. The secret may not be that this person is married. The secret may be what they have been afraid to admit about themselves. Maybe they are afraid of disappointing people. Maybe they are afraid of being judged. Maybe they are afraid that once you know the truth, you will see them differently. Maybe they have spent so much time trying to appear strong that they forgot what honesty feels like. And perhaps they have been carrying a decision they have not known how to make. Then something happened last night. It could have been a conversation, a memory, a question from someone close to them, a photograph, a message, a quiet moment when they were finally alone with their thoughts. Whatever the fictional circumstances may be, something forced them to confront a reality they had been avoiding. They realized that time does not make difficult truths disappear. It only gives them more weight, and suddenly, leaving next week is no longer simply about going somewhere. It becomes symbolic. Leaving can mean changing a routine. Leaving can mean moving away. Leaving can mean ending a chapter. Leaving can mean finally walking away from a situation that has been emotionally exhausting. And sometimes leaving means choosing honesty over comfort. That is why the word next week feels so powerful in this story. It represents a deadline, a moment when postponing the truth may no longer be possible. Imagine them sitting quietly, knowing that the conversation is coming. They rehearse the words. They imagine your reaction. They wonder whether you will be angry. They wonder whether you will walk away. They wonder whether you will ask questions they cannot answer. And beneath all those fears is one deeper realization: they should have told you sooner. That realization can be painful, because once someone understands that their silence hurt another person, they cannot erase the past simply by explaining it. An apology does not automatically repair trust. A confession does not automatically create a future, and love, no matter how meaningful it feels, cannot make dishonesty harmless. That is an important part of this message. If someone ever tells you they are married after allowing you to believe otherwise, the healthiest response is not to ignore the information simply because the story feels destined. Truth matters. Your boundaries matter. Your peace matters. You are allowed to step back and decide what you are comfortable with. You do not owe anyone immediate forgiveness. You do not owe anyone immediate trust, and you certainly do not have to accept a situation that conflicts with your values. Perhaps that is the unexpected lesson hidden inside the dramatic title. Maybe the biggest secret is not about the other person at all. Maybe it is about you discovering how much clarity you deserve. For a long time, you may have wondered why certain conversations felt incomplete. Why did they disappear and return? Why did they sometimes seem emotionally close and then distant? Why did their explanations never seem to answer the questions underneath your questions? Why did you feel as though there was always another layer? Sometimes there really is another layer, but sometimes uncertainty is simply uncertainty. That distinction matters. A spiritual style message can be entertaining and emotionally meaningful, but it should never replace direct communication or evidence. If someone is married, only that person can truthfully explain their circumstances. If someone is leaving, only they can tell you where they are going and why. So let this story be about the moment when questions become conversations, the moment when assumptions become facts, the moment when silence gives way to honesty. And the moment when you realize that knowing the truth is better than endlessly guessing. Now imagine the confession. They look at you and finally say, "There is something I should have told you." The room suddenly feels quieter. You wait, they hesitate. Then comes the sentence you never expected: "I am married." Everything stops. Not because you suddenly know what happens next, but because the past has just been rearranged. Every interaction is now being viewed through a different lens. Every unexplained absence, every strange excuse, every unanswered question, every moment when you wondered whether something was being hidden, you suddenly understand why the situation may have felt confusing. But then comes the second part, the part they have been terrified to say: "This isn't the only thing I haven't told you." And now the question becomes unavoidable. What else? Perhaps the secret is not another relationship. Perhaps it is not some dramatic conspiracy. Perhaps it is something much more human. Maybe they have been unhappy with the life they built. Maybe they have been afraid to admit that they do not know what they want. Maybe they have been pretending to have certainty when they actually feel confused. Maybe they are preparing to leave a familiar environment because they need time to rethink their choices. Maybe they are moving because of work, family responsibilities, education, or another ordinary reason. And maybe the greatest surprise is that their decision has less to do with romance than you imagined. That possibility is important because sometimes we make ourselves the center of another person's decisions when their life contains many factors we cannot see. Someone leaving does not automatically mean they are choosing someone else. Someone staying does not automatically mean they are choosing you. Someone being distant does not automatically mean they stopped caring. Someone returning does not automatically mean they are ready for a healthy relationship. Actions require context, words require honesty, and relationships require respect. The most powerful version of this story is therefore not about predicting what another person will do. It is about being prepared for whatever truth emerges. If they come forward honestly, listen carefully. If their story is confusing, ask for clarity. If they reveal information that changes your boundaries, give yourself permission to reconsider. If they apologize, you can acknowledge the apology without immediately restoring trust. And if they leave, remember that another person's decision does not determine your worth. That may be the real message hidden beneath the dramatic headline. You are not valuable because someone chooses you. You are not less valuable because someone leaves. You do not become more important because someone confesses feelings. Your worth is not a prize another person gets to award. You already have it. That realization changes the entire story. Suddenly, the approaching confession is no longer something you must fear. It becomes information. And information gives you choices. Maybe you choose distance. Maybe you choose friendship. Maybe you decide the situation is too complicated. Maybe you simply say, "Thank you for telling me, but I need time to process this." That is not weakness, that is wisdom. Sometimes the strongest response is not an emotional reaction, it is a pause, a breath, a decision to gather facts before deciding what anything means. The night before a confession can feel enormous in imagination, but the actual conversation may be much simpler. One person tells the truth. The other person listens, questions are asked, boundaries are established, and suddenly, something that seemed mysterious becomes understandable. Perhaps that is what happened last night in the fictional story. Not magic, not a supernatural guarantee. Just a person finally facing a truth they had avoided, and maybe that is why the idea of leaving next week feels so significant. They know that the next chapter will not look like the previous one. Something has changed. The question is whether that change becomes an ending, a beginning, or simply a period of distance. No one can know that in advance. But you can decide how you want to meet uncertainty, with fear, or with clarity, with obsession, or with patience, with endless guessing, or with honest questions. that choice belongs to you. There may be moments when your mind wants to turn every coincidence into a sign. A song appears, a name appears, someone mentions the person unexpectedly. You dream about them. You notice a familiar place, your phone lights up, and suddenly everything feels connected. Those moments can feel meaningful, but they are not proof of another person's intentions. A healthier approach is to let meaningful coincidences inspire reflection without allowing them to control your decisions. If you miss someone, acknowledge it. If you feel uncertain, acknowledge it. If you want answers, seek them respectfully. If you need distance, take it. You do not have to decode every event. You do not have to chase every sign. You do not have to force a story to have a predetermined ending. Sometimes the most beautiful ending is simply understanding what happened and becoming wiser because of it. Now return to the fictional confession. They have finally told you they are married. They expect anger. Instead, you remain quiet. You ask one question: why didn't you tell me? That question is more powerful than any dramatic accusation, because it goes directly to the heart of the problem. Why? They look down. They struggle to answer. Finally, they admit, because I was afraid of what would happen if you knew. And there it is, the real secret: fear. Fear may have been controlling the entire situation. Fear of judgment, fear of losing connection, fear of disappointing people, fear of admitting that life did not turn out exactly as expected, fear of making a decision, fear of being alone, fear of consequences, and fear can make people behave in ways they later regret. Understanding fear does not excuse dishonesty, but it can explain why someone delayed the truth. That distinction matters. You can understand someone without accepting their behavior. You can have compassion without abandoning your boundaries. You can care about someone while recognizing that their choices are not healthy for you. That is emotional maturity. And perhaps that is what this unexpected confession is really asking you to discover. Not whether someone is your destined soulmate, but whether the connection in front of you is honest, respectful, and safe. Those questions matter far more. A person can feel deeply connected to someone and still be unable to offer a healthy relationship. A person can have strong emotions and still make poor choices. A person can care and still hurt someone. Feelings alone do not create trust. Trust grows through consistent actions. That is why the next chapter should not be judged by words alone. Watch what happens after the confession. Does the person take responsibility? Do they stop making excuses? Do they respect your boundaries? Do they communicate honestly? Do their actions match their promises? Those answers tell you more than any dramatic declaration. And perhaps this is why the title says, "But that's not the biggest secret." The biggest secret may be that the truth you have been waiting for is not about whether someone belongs with you. It is about whether you are willing to choose truth over fantasy. That can be difficult, because fantasy is comfortable. Fantasy allows every unanswered question to have the answer you hope for. Reality is different. Reality asks you to accept what is actually happening. Reality may surprise you. Reality may disappoint you. Reality may even free you. But reality gives you something uncertainty cannot: a foundation for making choices, So if someone tells you they are leaving next week, ask what that means. If someone says they are married, ask what that means for the relationship. If someone says they have been hiding something, let them explain, and then give yourself time. You do not need to decide everything in one conversation. You do not need to immediately understand every emotion. You can say, "I need time." That sentence can protect your peace. Maybe the person leaves next week. Maybe they stay. Maybe the confession happens. Maybe the truth turns out to be completely different from what you expected. Whatever happens, you can meet it without losing yourself. That is the heart of this message. The future does not become less meaningful simply because it is uncertain. In fact, uncertainty is part of being human. We cannot know every conversation before it happens. We cannot know every decision another person will make. We cannot guarantee that someone will stay, but we can choose honesty. We can choose boundaries. We can choose patience. We can choose self-respect. And those choices remain available even when everything else changes. Perhaps you have been waiting for someone else to make a decision. Waiting for a message, waiting for an explanation, waiting for clarity, waiting for a sign, waiting for them to finally say what they feel. But maybe you have forgotten that you also get to make decisions. You do not have to remain suspended in someone else's uncertainty. You can decide what kind of communication you accept. You can decide what behavior you will not tolerate. You can decide whether a complicated situation is right for you. You can decide that peace is more important than chasing an answer. That is not giving up, that is choosing yourself. And perhaps the greatest twist in the entire story is that the person who seemed to hold all the power never actually did. They could leave, they could confess, they could return, they could remain silent, but they cannot decide your worth, they cannot determine your future. They cannot control the person you become after this chapter. That part belongs to you. So if something feels different right now, slow down. Do not rush to conclusions. Do not assume that every strange feeling means something supernatural is happening. Do not let a dramatic headline make you afraid of an event that has not happened. Instead, use the story as an invitation to prepare emotionally for honest communication. If someone important to you needs to tell you something, let them speak. If the truth hurts, give yourself permission to feel hurt. If the truth brings relief, allow yourself to feel relieved. If you need distance, take it. And if you discover that the connection cannot become what you hoped, remember that an ending can still contain meaning. Not every important connection is meant to last forever. Some connections teach us communication. Some teach us boundaries. Some teach us patience. Some teach us what we never want to repeat. Some remind us of qualities we value, and some simply help us discover ourselves. That does not make the connection meaningless. It makes it part of your growth. Now imagine the final moment of the conversation. The person who has been hiding the truth finally says, "I know this changes everything." And perhaps you answer, "Yes. It changes what I thought I knew. But now I finally have the information I needed." Notice what happened. The power shifted. The mystery ended. You were no longer trying to guess. You were no longer waiting for clues. You had facts. and facts allow you to choose. Maybe they leave next week, maybe they do not, maybe they are married, maybe the circumstances are more complicated than the title suggests, maybe the biggest secret is something entirely different. But one thing remains true. You deserve relationships built on honesty. You deserve communication that does not leave you constantly guessing. You deserve people who respect your boundaries. And you deserve enough time to make decisions without being pressured by someone else's emotions. So let this message end not with a prediction, but with a reminder. Do not chase what refuses to communicate. Do not sacrifice your peace for a mystery. Do not turn uncertainty into certainty simply because you hope for a particular outcome. Let truth reveal itself through real conversations and consistent actions. And if someone comes to you with a confession, listen carefully. The most important sentence may not be the first one. It may be what comes afterward. It may be the explanation. It may be the accountability. It may be the answer to the question, what happens now? That is where the real story begins, because leaving is not always the end, staying is not always the beginning, and a confession is not automatically a promise. Sometimes the biggest revelation is simply realizing that you are allowed to choose what happens next. So breathe. Slow down. Let tomorrow arrive without forcing it to become today. You do not have to know every answer tonight. You only need enough clarity to take the next healthy step, and if someone truly has something important to tell you, let them tell you with honesty. Then decide what their truth means for your life, not according to a prediction, not according to a fantasy, not according to fear, but according to reality. Respect, and what feels right for you, because perhaps the greatest secret waiting to be revealed is not what your soulmate has been hiding, perhaps it is what you are finally discovering about yourself.